to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, June the 23rd in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, so we'll start off. And Walt, you have to say it's been another crazy week in the world. I want to start off with this headline in the Globe and Mail today. Yeah. Can you just read the...
South Carolina's governor remove the Confederate flag.
Yeah. So this story of the kind of crazy murder of many people at a church happened on almost the same day as the Pope's encyclical. And I noticed that a week later, the Pope story is basically gone from the media, and they've decided to focus on, I mean, the story of the people who were involved in that, you know, I mean, they're great and wonderful people. But I noticed that the story of the Pope's encyclical, in which he said that we're killing the earth and we have to reduce our consumption and we have to treat the earth better and we have to change the way we're living, that story's gone. And that's because they don't want to talk about that story. And that's one of the ways the media operates. They always find something else, and very often it's crime and murder, to cover up other stories. And really, what the Pope said is vitally important, because we are destroying the planet, and we've got to change our ways. And the corporate media just will not say that. It's kind of an amazing situation.
And time again, it seems to have happened when you have a sensational story like this that overshadows other news of any importance,
yeah,
sometimes for months.
You know, the story of the two men that escaped from the prison in New York, that's gotten more coverage.
Yeah.
Than, I mean, every detail of that, they're all over it. But there's no details of, or very few details of what we've got to do immediately to change, to save our own lives.
Right. And, you know, it goes a long ways back. You remember, I think it was 1993, when you told me, Jack, when the O.J. Simpson trials were going on.
God, yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And at the same time, there was other much more important trials going on in New York for the first bombers of the World Trade Center.
Yes.
And these people were testifying that they were working on behalf of the FBI or the CIA. I can't remember, one or the other. And that testimony never saw the light of day. Yeah. Meanwhile, we studied O.J. pulling on leather gloves for days on end, and they dragged the story out and dragged the story out. Yeah. Yeah. And he was acquitted, wasn't he, in the end? He
was acquitted, but never by the media.
No.
He was acquitted by the jury unanimously,
yeah,
but in the eyes of the media, he had to be guilty. And you're absolutely right, the story of the first bombing of the World Trade Center, in which a number of people were killed, it was with a car bomb in the parking garage. That's underneath. Right. And they always said that the whole thing was an FBI setup. You know, they were almost like patsies, the guys who were arrested.
Yeah, and they were testifying to that in court.
Yeah, never mentioned.
While the O.J. thing was going on. That really sensitized me to that idea that whenever something really big is happening, it seems that another event occurs, whether the elites had orchestrated it or just want to play it up, one way or the other. We're going to hear ends and ends of days all about some trivia about some story that really isn't that important.
Yeah, like, for example, the escape of those two men from a New York prison. Really, it's gotten more coverage in our media than the entire story of the Pope and so many others. I mean, it's like every day now the environmental crisis grows, and not only the environmental crisis, like the economic crisis that's about to befall us is also going to be disastrous. there was something in the Senate that, again, just focuses this same attention on how the media operates. Over the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of coverage in the Canadian media about the scandal in the Senate, and people over-expensing and all that, and they found like $1 million worth of stuff, and it cost $23 million audit to find the $1 million that had been. But what they never, at exactly the same time, the stories that are not covered were that the Senate passed Bill C-51, setting up Harper's secret police force that will basically be there to protect the oil companies and everybody else from the citizens of Canada. So Bill C-51 was passed by the Senate in complete secrecy. Why did they focus so much attention in the media on the scandal when the real scandal was the fact that this bunch of crooks passed Bill C-51? And at the same time, they also passed, which was also very important, Michael Chong's parliamentary reform bill, which really got watered down. But it's a very important bill that will help democratize our parliament. And nothing is more important than that. And yet that bill also just passed, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
But not hardly a word in the media anywhere.
Yeah, and it goes on and on. I mean, it sort of falls right into the, what's happening right now in BC with the healthcare worker firings.
Yes.
And this story is all over the media right now. And I think you mentioned that perhaps there's another story that they're hiding here also.
It's funny, when all of a sudden the NDP and the media all started calling for a public inquiry into the health care, and there should be a public inquiry, that's for sure. There should have been one years ago. But it just triggered in my mind something I'd read about something that Christy Clark was going to do this summer. So I thought, well, I'll just look into that, and I did. And so here's the story. It was just announced today that on July 13th, the provincial legislature is going to meet, and they're going to pass a law that will ratify a project development agreement, a PDA, between the government of BC and Petronas, which is Petronas, as everybody calls it, which is the big LNG poisoner of our province. I mean, this is going to involve a massive poisoning of our province. So they've made the deal. The PDA has been signed. Now the government has to pass it. So they're calling the House into session in July, I think on July 13th. I phoned the NDP. They said this could pass in as little as 1 week. It'll be introduced, it'll get 3 readings and pass. Maybe it'll take 2 weeks. The NDP hasn't said they're going to oppose it, because the NDP also supports fracking and LNG, the whole disastrous thing. So what is the agreement that's going to be made? We don't know, because they won't show us the PDA. The project development agreement that is going to be passed remains secret. But there was an editorial in the Times Colonist about it, and these are a few of the things they say. Christy Clark, in the PDA, Christy Clark made a concession that no BC government has ever granted. She indemnified the company against any increase in taxes or royalties until 2038, the end of the agreement. So that means if a future government raises royalties, the company would be entitled to compensation in the amount of the increase. Normally, governments do not bind the hands of their successors. It's understood that whatever tax rates one administration imposes, another may change. That's just the way it is. But this agreement has the effect of a legally binding contract, meaning it would be difficult, if not impossible, to set aside. It's a measure of how radical this deal is that special legislation is required to put it in place. So this is going to happen on July 13th. There's nothing in the media about it. The NDP isn't exactly screaming about it. And the Times columnist also raises the issue that there are many, many companies operating in the LNG industry, and will they all get the same deal? Because you can't give one company a special deal, or possibly you can. So I don't understand how these things, I mean, it almost boggles the mind.
Well, you know, and I always kind of joke about the Liberal NDP coalition government, but, you know, I'm not really joking, because this is a case where there really isn't any opposition on a really serious environmental and economic issue that will affect generations to come. And the sad thing is the tax rate that they're going to be charging. We're not sure what it is. I think it's 3%.
Who knows? That's
that
it.
was
We
mentioned
don't
a few
even
months
know.
ago.
Yeah.
3%. Now, the thing is that we're going to be spending, the province and us taxpayers will be spending hundreds of millions of dollars on infrastructure to facilitate, you know, the industry. And we're collecting 3% taxes. It's almost unheard of. It's so ridiculously low. We're not only giving it all away, we're destroying our own environment, destroying our own economies at the same time. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, fracking is massively poisonous to the land, everything on the land and the water. It requires huge amounts of fresh water to do, which everybody says everybody's short of fresh water, and yet here is Christy Clark and the NDP. They all supported the destruction of our environment at an unprecedented rate. What's wrong with them? And going back to the story of the Pope, I mean, it's this whole climate change thing, and beyond that, the destruction of the earth. And here in BC, it's like our leadership can't destroy it fast enough.
Well, it's no mystery if you think about who did they work for in their previous lives before they were elected. And, Christy Clark was a lobbyist for Enbridge pipelines, and so was
Well, wait a second, maybe.
Maybe.
Her husband was.
Oh, yeah.
Her husband, yeah. She was close, but...
The thing is that, they're obviously looking out after the corporate elites. You can't spin this around any other way. It's what they're doing. They're trying to spin it for us, to try to believe that it's going to be something good for British Columbia. But there's no evidence to support that. And here we have the NDP. Look, what are they doing? Do they really think it's such a great idea, too? How could they think it's such a great idea? Like, who are the wizards and the gurus in the NDP that would look at the LNG and any objective measurement, economic or environmental issues, social issues, development issues? There's no plus side to this. It's just a long, sad, many decades of pollution and degradation.
So let's move ahead in a positive way. Let's create industry that is not destructive. I mean, why do we want to create an industry that's poisoning the province, and especially our water? Why do we want to do that? And yet, can't we do anything better? It's bizarre.
Well, somebody's going to make some money, Jack. That's all I can say.
Yes, right. So, about this bill, I mean, the thing about it is they're going to pass it right here in Victoria.
Yeah.
All of our democratic legislators, our elected representatives, are going to be here in Victoria on July 13th for a week or two or maybe 3 that it takes them to get this bill through, right in our midst. So let's see if somehow us, we the people of Victoria, who I think a lot of us don't want our planet destroyed by these lunatics, they're going to be in our midst, they're going to be in our legislature. Maybe we can do something to really make this an issue, really stand up to these undemocratic fascists and try to slow them down. They're doing it around the world, and it's up to us too. Do you have any topics?
Well, I think you covered the ones that I was interested in.
Residential schools? Yeah. I just want to say that the government and the churches who played a big part in this deserve all the negative things that are falling upon them for doing this. But I think we really have to ask, as we always do, where was the media in that story? Because I grew up in those years and we were never told. And it's that same old thing. The media knew about the residential schools probably from day one. In fact, they were probably in on the planning of it. But they never told the people of Canada. They allowed it to happen, just as they're going to allow, just as they allow the genetic contamination of our food supply, the destruction of the environment, the changing of our economy into one that works for the rich and the poor or homeless. The media knows, and they knew about the residential schools, and they kept it quiet. And the media should be apologizing. The governments have apologized. The churches have apologized. The media should apologize, and even more so, corporate Canada should apologize, because a big reason for the residential schools and the attempted destruction of the First Nations people was to clear them out of the way for the logging companies, the mining companies, Alcan. I've heard stories about Alcan that are just horrendous.
Well, I think, going right back to when Columbus first set foot on North America, the first person to jump off the bow of the ship was a priest. They always brought the priests with them to, educate the natives and to convert them to Catholicism or whatever religion. But the thing is that is a process of cultural destruction from the very start. And it all fits very well into the colonialist, model. And if there are people on the land that you want, you have to disenfranchise them. This is what they did in South Africa with apartheid, and what Israel is doing with the Palestinians. They looked at the Canadian model of residential schools and reserves and used those models and the laws to set up apartheid and to set up the system in Israel. So, we got something to be proud of, I guess. We had this model that worked. The thing is, we shouldn't be too surprised about it. And, now that, time has gone by and First Nations people are asserting their rights, they're gaining some ground back. I'm just hoping that they do not get bought out by the oil companies and bought out by corporate interests, especially with the pipelines that now offering that all these First Nations people are going to be involved and be employed and stuff like that. And it seems to me that that's just another process of disenfranchising them, because once they give up those rights, they're never going to get them back again.
No. Really, good luck to us all. I was listening to CFAX today, and one of the hosts, they had a guest on. They were talking about one thing, but he just had to bring in something about vaccinations and how those of us who don't want the corporations to vaccinate us when they are like, we're a big problem in this society, we anti-vaxxers. And I read a story written by Robert Kennedy Jr. It was in Rolling Stone. I think it was published in 2005, and I just looked it up again. Do you remember that story at all? Yeah. Robert Kennedy took a lot of flack from the corporate media for this, but basically it was this. There was a secret meeting held a few years before, and somebody sent Kennedy the papers. The meeting was behind all the big vaccine companies and the Center for Disease Control, because they were really concerned that their research was showing that the thimerosal, the mercury-based preservative they were putting into the vaccines, was really injuring children. So the meeting was, according to Kennedy, to make sure that the public never found out about this. And that's what Kennedy's story was, how they completely covered this over. And then they did take the mercury out of most, if not all, children's vaccines. God knows what they put in. They still use it in flu vaccines, and they still use it in vaccines to which adults get. But, the vaccine industry, the drug companies, they certainly don't care about our health. So we should be very careful of media telling us that vaccines are safe and effective and they have to be done.
And if they disclose absolutely everything that's in the vaccine, we might have a better chance to assess whether we're in favor of it. Right now, they don't have to do that.
Yeah, and if vaccines are safe and effective, hey, I'll be first in line. But I no longer believe they are. Let's finish off with Saanich. I don't know if you know what is going on there these days with the spyware thing, but...
Well, the media's spinning it today a bit more. There was an inquiry. Richard Atwell was asking for an inquiry. I think they've turned that idea down. Saying that the chief of police was in some type of conflict of interest.
That was a bit of a separate issue.
That was a side story.
Yeah. But to me, the most amazing thing about the spyware thing is that it's been months now since it happened, and nothing is happening. It's just being swept under the rug.
They don't know what to do, Jack. They're guilty.
Yeah, they're guilty.
The Saanich council are guilty. They did it. Their only defense is, were they ignorant of the law, or were they disdainful? Did they plan to do this, or were they just really that stupid?
And the staff, even more so, who fed this council misinformation, and yet the council doesn't seem to care. No,
to a certain degree, but there's a cabal in the Saanich council. I can't tell if they're liberal or NDPers. You know, they all act the same to me. They were trying to ram that one big sewage treatment plant idea down our throats. Yeah. They had 5 people on the CRD, and with the Victoria Council, they pretty well ran it. And they get caught with a terrible idea. And the public now knows how awful that idea was, and they have to try to live that down. And that's all tied into, of course, Richard Atwell being elected mayor and proposing a much better idea.
Walter, we're out of time.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
Thank you very much. And thank you for watching this segment.